Hi, everyone. Welcome to Parent to Parent. I am Tania Farran, your host for Parent to Parent on a Monday evening. It is great to be back with you all. I hope you're having a great first day of the week. If you consider Monday your first day, happy Dr. Martin Luther King Day or observance of Dr. Martin Luther King Day for everyone. I hope you've taken time to celebrate, memorialize, however you choose to do. Today, I wanted to introduce myself a little bit to those of you who don't know me. My name is Tania Farran. I am a school administrator. I've been a school administrator for a long time. I've been an elementary teacher, a middle school principal currently, an elementary principal, and a high school principal. So I have worked with parents and families of all ages. This is my book, Raising the Well-Adjusted Child, a Parent's Manual. You can find it on Amazon, so check that out. We're not talking about my book today, but I wanted to share that with you in case you have someone that you want to grab that for or you wanted it for yourself. You can check that out today. So my guest today is Dr. Steve Hudgens. He is a therapist and an author, and I'm excited to bring him up today to talk to him about his book, Piece by Piece, his blended experience of a Mosaic family. And this is the book we're going to be talking about tonight. We also talked about it in November, but welcome, Dr. Hudgens. Tell everybody a little bit about you. Give them a little bit of background about you.
Well, what is the background? It's too much. No, it's growing up in the military, being in the military kind of explains everything. You know, it's you defend the country and you start working and grasping of what do you want to do? And so I left the engineering field and began doing therapy. So I've been doing it for 13 plus years. I've done private practice, inpatient, and work with other agencies. And currently I'm working on my own private practice. I do some adjunct professor for Rogers State University here in Oklahoma. And then, of course, I'm working on my third book. This one here you have is my second one.
Nice. I'm sorry, I must have missed the first one along the way, but I absolutely love this book. Those of you who watched my opening of this event a few weeks ago when I was talking about all of my guests on here, I've been reading this book, and I was telling Dr. Hudgens that this is like, I've been chunking this as he comes in to help guide me through my reading of this book. And I'm out of town right now, and I have the book. I love the actual book of it all, but I had to purchase it on my Kindle because I didn't bring that book with me. So, which I was fine with purchasing it again because I love the book so much. So I highly recommend it. We're going to get into kind of like the second part of this, and I don't want to waste a whole lot of time because we only spent 30 minutes together. But I did drop, for those of you that are on LinkedIn, I did drop the video, and I might have done this on Facebook as well. If you're joining us on Facebook, and under Creative Living Ideas, I did drop in the November recording of our session together. So that is in there already for those of you who would like to check that out so you can hear the beginning part of the book. So without further ado, let's talk about that, that meaning. What is the definition? What does it mean to have a Mosaic family? Can you kind of paraphrase that? The last time I had you read it, but can you kind of paraphrase that for everybody and let them know what the Mosaic family is like?
You know, when I came across the idea, I thought about, you know, I grew up in a loving home. I had my parents were married for 60 years, so I didn't understand the dynamics of a blended until I married. I had remarried and developed a blended family myself. And when you think about blended, that's like a smoothie. Everything goes into it. Nothing makes sense. And it's all, you know, just great taste, so to speak. But sometimes you just got to differentiate. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes Europe uses bonus family. When I think about a bonus, what's bonus about it? Except for Christmas time, you get 20,000 presents versus 2 in a normal family, so to speak.
Right.
But when I think about Mosaic, I think of a beautiful mosaic. I was in Paris and got to see Notre Dame, England. I got to see Westminster Abbey, beautiful stained glass. And when I think about Mosaic, are we not each pieces or shards of life so that we can have boundaries into place? And so when you think of a mosaic, it could be stone, it could be whatever you want to make of it that makes an overall beautiful picture, but you still have distinct pieces that are bound by boundaries into place. And so when I think about a mosaic family, it's formed after a divorce of two people coming together. One may have a child, one may not, but that's to me is a blended family, is when children come involved into a situation and you're wearing many hats in a family.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I am personally, I am part of a Mosaic family because I like that term. My mom watched our very first episode and she loved it. She was like, this is exactly a perfect depiction of that. You do try to blend a family and it's kind of messy, like you said. You put it up in a blender. And I was 26 years old when my parents divorced. I was married. I was out of the house. And honestly, I was grateful for that. I was grateful that for the fact that I didn't have to merge with another parent, because at 26, I had a mom and a dad,
Right.
and I didn't need another mom and a dad, and if you want to look at it as bonus or however, but that relationship it takes time. And I think that's the piece that I'm really getting from this section. I'm in part 2 of the book. The book has a lot of pages, y'all, but it is great. It's an easy read, meaning it's understandable. That's what I mean. It's understandable when you read it. And I love that about it. And so it's taken time. I mean, my mom and my stepdad have been married for 28 years. My father and his wife have been married for probably the same amount of time. And it's taken a long time, for the families to it kind of had this ebb and flow. So I don't want to spend much time talking about me, but my point being is it's once you start looking at each individual person as a piece of the mosaic that you're putting together, you start thinking about how the family dynamic works a little bit differently. And I love that. And I think taking the time to go through and really contemplate that when you're blending a family, creating your own mosaic of your family, taking the time to start thinking about that. So even if you're not even in it yet, you and your partner haven't gotten married, but each have 3 kids or 5 kids or 2 or whatever, read the book. Start looking at that and thinking about that. And I did want to take a second. Thank you, Linda, for joining us, and Christy Williams. Thank you for joining us. Drop any questions you have for Dr. Hutchins in the chat. We're happy to answer them as well. Did you want to say anything? You look like you were ready to say something. Any thoughts coming to your mind?
Well, just when you think about the book, I learned from my own personal experience on top of the research that I did with live people changing their names and the dynamics, and being able to put just a formation of who people are and what we go through. We just don't talk about our stories because we feel guilt, shame, or
Mm-hmm.
just ridicule from people. And I believe if we own and tell our stories, how much powerful we can be and be authentic in who we are. And so part of that chapter, I even talk about taking a sabbatical because in dating, because oftentimes what I found is that we jump one relationship into the another. I see that a lot with my couple
Yeah.
who are blended, now what I call mosaic. So yeah, it's more than just building a family. It's helping you to uh, navigate the waters of being single, and all of a sudden we're getting, whether you get remarried or not, you're still considered a mosaic family when you're in a relationship.
Absolutely. So, talk about those labels with us, or those words that are given, right? When we put a family together, we have that step parent, your stepchild, your step nephew, your stepsister, your step brother. Talk to everyone about kind of that definition and what does that step mean or can be interpreted as.
If you really wanted to look at words, there's a dynamic to how words are formulated. I could sit here and say, don't think about a white polar bear. What do we just do? We thought about a white polar bear. And so that's where our mind goes. And so when you think about control versus manage. What does your body do when you feel those two words? Control. Oh my gosh, we feel kind of tense. When we say manage, it's more of a laid back. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I look at the labels when we think about what Hollywood has done to poor Cinderella. Step. Is there a sense of belonging? Or am I stepping on you because you're not my child, so to speak? And so when I think about the word step, it kind of doesn't help bring together a belonging.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about step, I'm stepping on something more than what that I need. And so when I think about that, or even bonus family, it's who likes labels. And when we think about blended, we've already discussed, the terms within blended. But I saw how language either reinforces a belonging or quietly fragments
Mm-hmm.
the individuals that come together. And oftentimes I've seen fragmented families coming together because we don't know how to navigate the sense of labels. And to me, labels are destructive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I was talking to my son-in-law, and I said something about my parents are coming, and he looked at me and I'm like, it's just easier. I just prefer these are just my parents. It's fine. I don't have to say my mom and my stepdad, my dad and my stepmom. They're my parents. It was just easier for me. And he was like, I said, it's okay. Like it's okay to accept that too. That's my personal perception of that. And because I think those labels are hard, and then I think it can lead to like a negative connotation when it doesn't have to be, right? So I felt like that was really interesting because I know a lot of people do take that in a negative light, and so I thought it was interesting what was available in there. So talk a little bit more about your discoveries, you've talked a little bit about it, your thoughts and discoveries that you made on blended and bonus families versus mosaic families. You have a section in the book where you talk a little bit about those differences.
When we think about, I like looking outside the box. What started all this was an article that I read that stated that, blended families or second divorces are high by 65% of those marriages end in divorce. And I'm like, why?
Mm-hmm.
There was no why. And so I talked to my professor in my research and I said, I think I found a gap because there is no explanation. A lot of the research just kind of stalled out when the federal government gave it over to the United States, to the individual states to follow through, and it didn't fall through. So I'm like, why? What is the behind the reason families are ending in divorce? And it's not because these things are complex. They struggle when complexity is denied. And so when I think about the voices of these people that I'm hearing and I'm recording, and I'm like, I'm impacted by their stories of variety of different reasons why they divorced. And so when you think about the discovery of people, if you allow them room to speak, their stories speak volumes. And when identity, grief, loyalty, conflicts are acknowledged, the families tend to stabilize. But when they're ignored, what happens? Resentment grows silently.
Mm-hmm.
And so we begin to rip apart the very thread that holds us all together. And so we think of getting married a second time as a second chance. But have we really dealt with the underlying core? And so the main theme of my research that causes second divorces is fear.
Mm.
We haven't worked on our past childhood hurt wounds. And those wounds, develop into the first marriage into the second. And if we don't resolve those, we keep escalating more to where the divorces are easier to do because we haven't modified who we are as a person and dealing with confronting these childhood hurt wounds.
So sort of like same problem, different person.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could see that. I could see that being something. So, that I love the term mosaic family. And going into that, we've talked about everyone coming in as a shard of glass, right? We all have our own sharp edges and shape and, what makes us, our component, what makes us our piece of glass that goes into the mosaic. But let's talk about kind of the grout that goes in between it. We haven't talked about the grout yet. And, that's things that you had talked about, like identity and boundaries and loyalty and adaptability that goes into that. So talk to us about, what do those terms mean in the grout, and how do people talk about them?
Well, when you think about grout, it's what holds us together, right? Or what can put waterproof, so to speak, in a shower. We put grout on the tiles so that the water doesn't seep through, but it holds the tiles to the wall. And so identity is, who am I in this family? A child gets confused because, oh my gosh, do I call her mom? She's just my some
Mhm,
woman. She's not my birth mom. But
mhm,
identity within the grout helps us to define, who am I in this family?
mhm,
There is a book that defines boundaries, a line in the sand, and I just don't know if I agree with that. So the terminology, when I think about boundaries, it defines emotional safety roles, but instead of a line, I think boundaries is a threshold. It's a door. It's, what am I going to allow in and out? And oftentimes we do not have boundaries within these type of families because each one brings their own perspective. And so it's not that I'm trying to tell the step parent, or however you wanted to classify it, the non-biological parent, that I'm taking authority away from them, but the bio parent should be the one disciplining the non-bio child and allow the other one to back up the bio parent. And so that creates a loyalty. Loyalty acknowledges that loving one parent does not betray another. When you think about the grout, it helps to be able to hold everything together. And so oftentimes, how much do children need safety and knowing that, hey, we're not betraying the other parent, although they may want the two parents to stay together, and there's guilt and shame because of how they feel. And so oftentimes we need to address that in therapy. When it comes down to these type of mosaic families, the grout needs to be adaptable. In other words, it allows a family to evolve rather than fracture under pressure. Because without grout, even beautiful pieces fall apart. And so that's how I kind of explain the differences of grout that becomes within the mosaic family.
mhm. Yeah, so everyone's bringing in, having to work on those pieces in terms of that identity and boundaries, and it takes time, I would imagine. It takes time for that to solidify, and to hold the pieces together. I love that. So the other thing, and y'all, I'm so sorry. I meant to put this on a slide and share, but I'm going to hold up my Kindle here so you can kind of see this. So this is the visual in the book for the Mosaic family system theory. And we're going to talk about this. So you can maybe take a screenshot if you want to, or you can draw it on your paper. But it is a mosaic compass. And at the top, it has identity, it has boundaries, it has loyalty, it has adaptability. And so that's what he was just talking about. But how does a family go through this? Like, so to me, I'm going to ask a question again in a minute. But when I'm reading this book and I'm looking at this to me brings pause, right? You can't just read through this book, y'all. You can't just go, oh, cover to cover, I'm done, I got it. You have to go through this book and look at it, and you have to do some contemplating and thinking and planning. So how do you recommend parents go through and look at this mosaic family system theory? And I'm not talking, and again, I'm going to ask it again. I'm sorry, I interrupted myself. This is any age child. People think that it's, if you have a child that's living with you, the family dynamic changes no matter what age the children are or the family members are. And it's not just that family member. People lose their brother-in-laws, their sister-in-laws, their, nieces, nephews. Families change even beyond that immediate family. So how does a family go through that system? What do they need to do to kind of work through those pieces of the grout?
Oftentimes we weren't even growing up, we weren't explained how family is. We just did. We lived it. And we talk about attachment and things of that nature. And I began to wonder, there's something more than just to be attached members within the family. But in this quadrant, do we talk about these four domains that families go through? When you think about quadrant, you think about emotional safety.
Mhm.
That answers the question, am I safe to speak and exist in this family without being punished or rejected?
Mhm.
So how does a family help to feel emotional safety? The other quadrant is role clarity. Oh my gosh, how many times do we get our roles mixed up? For me as a father, am I a father, a step parent, a stepfather? What am I in these roles? And then it's like, I'm an ex-husband, husband type situation. And so role clarity is important because this is where families struggle the most. It answers who is responsible for what. And so when roles become blurred is because when they become blurred, what happens? Our anxiety rises. And because of anxiety, fear, and anger and so forth, it just breaks down the family structure. The other is attachment stability. Oftentimes, it's difficult for children to attach to a new partner of your biological parent. And so it helps children to know that love is not conditional, that relationships are not temporary, and they don't have to choose sides to stay connected.
Mhm.
And so, the blended family, we had to divorce. And so it causes this role ambiguity that happens. And so that's where that fourth quadrant comes in. In Mosaic families, we change so much,
Mhm.
schedule shift. The kids have their own activities and it just gets really hectic. And so instead of being rigid, where's our adaptability that healthy families can adjust without losing their identity?
Mhm. Yeah, and I would like this is a this is a perfect workbook night with your family and who you're blending in, right? And who you're piecing together. And so, taking this quadrant and having everybody write kind of pieces about this to me. I think this opens a conversation. This is what
Yes.
this is how I would use this. Like let's talk about what are your boundaries? What are my boundaries? We all put our boundaries written in there. What is our loyalty? What is our identity? Who am I in this family? I'm the first child in the other family, but I'm the fourth child in this family. That role in itself changes. There's so much,
Right.
that goes along with that quadrant that you can work on as a family. And I do love this. I'm going to skip through here. Um, Dr. Hutchins has in the back of the book, in the back of each chapter, I'm going to skip through. Some key takeaways, which I love that it kind of sums things up for you, and some reflective questions. I'm all about the reflective questions. So what relational roles within your family or your client's family, so if you're a therapist and you don't have this book, you need this book, might be forced to fit in rather than honored individually? How might loyalty binds or unresolved attachments be impacting a family member's sense of belonging or identity? What communication patterns, boundary work, or therapeutic support could serve as the grout to hold each family member's individuality without glossing over emotional cracks? I mean, so many great things. Like this is one chapter, y'all. This is chapter 5, I believe I'm in, because I'm still at that part of the book. It is just that great, and lots of things to think about. Did you want to add anything else to that before I went on?
Well, I was just going to say it's a good tool because when I was working with my own blended family system, one of the things is that kids need structure.
Mm-hmm.
They may come from the other home that doesn't have structure. My kids came from a home where the parent was friends with them and there wasn't much structure. And so oftentimes when my kids came back and then her kids came, we did family meetings. We talked about what works, what didn't work, what can we do better. Often a reminder of our expectations helps. And so having that quadrant can also feel like, do I feel safe? Did
Mm-hmm.
I feel safe? where do I have any loyalty here? And so it kind of helps bring out and formulate a lot of more questions.
Yeah, it does. And really that door, that communication line that opens helps, and there's so much to it. I would say if you are creating a Mosaic family, I would make sure that you have a therapist on hand, because even opening the door to communication cannot always be simple for families. That in itself can be challenging. Hello, Lisa Fevick. Thank you for joining us tonight. I so appreciate your support. The last thing I want to talk about tonight is that parent alienation syndrome. What is that? What is parent alienation syndrome and the impact on children and parents?
So it's an old term. Canada first had it in their court systems. Mike Huckabee, a governor out of Arkansas, created a chapter in parental alienation. Parental alienation is where one parent sabotages the relationship with the other parent. Even in marriages or families that are intact or out that are been broken and divorced, parental alienation just sabotages that parent, and it doesn't help. And what I'm doing is when I look at the APA, the Association of Psychological Association, there's a psychologist, APA. They don't look at parental alienation. They call it a syndrome, and there's nothing that can be proven. So I'm doing some research now to show that disruptive parental attachment is a thing, because when you look at the dynamics of children, when there's a split within the dynamics of the family, and you have a personality disorder such as a narcissist or a borderline as such, these type of personalities coerce, manipulate, dictate, whatever, and it hurts the children. And I'm looking at it from a domestic violence situation because it's an emotional coercive way of getting a child to side with a specific parent, that the other parent's not as good as me. And so that's what parental alienation does. And so I'm looking at working with legislators now in Oklahoma. There's about 3 or 4 bills that I'm working on and trying to adjust the language, like the best interest of the child. That's so subjective. And so if we can look at what is the emotional, physical, mental status of this child, if their grades are impacted, if that child's having tantrums more, then that tells me there's something else going on within that child's attachment with the other parent. And is it a personality disorder? I don't know. But that's kind of, it's not a conflict. It's a disruption of a child's attachment.
Thank you for sharing that. Lastly, and you kind of talked about that a little bit, but I'm going to go to my last question here. Two more questions. So what's your best advice for families that are creating a Mosaic family? You only can pick one.
Honor your broken pieces. Don't rush in unity. Build trust before authority. And remember, love does not require erasure. Belonging is created, not demanded. And that's how I kind of look at what ways can we work as a Mosaic families by building trust. And by building trust, we got to be vulnerable. But if we haven't worked through our childhood hurt wounds, how do we expect to be vulnerable when we're living in fear because of reaction?
Wow. That's a lot said in a short period of time. So Dr. Hutchins is also working on his 3rd book. So tell us a little bit about your 3rd book.
Well, I don't want to give the name away.
Okay.
It builds that anticipation. So my next book explores what people become when survival requires hiding part of themselves. It looks at how families face faith and systems unintentionally reward masks and what healing looks like when those masks are finally set down. So it's a personal, clinical, redemptive. So I'm also bringing people's stories in, that how often that growing up, we put a smile in public because the family is great. But what stayed in Vegas doesn't really stay in Vegas anymore. And so it's what ways can we be authentic and not have to hide part of ourselves anymore because we are safe.
I love that. That's going to be a great read. Oh my gosh. And when can we anticipate that being done? What's your timeline on that?
I'm hoping July. I'm in the midst of finishing the chapters to get it over to the editor, so I'm hoping by July.
Nice. That's a good time frame. But in the meantime, y'all check out Piece by Piece. It is a paperback. There is a hardback, I think, as well, right,
Yes.
Dr. Hutchins? And the Kindle version, you can take it everywhere. You can have one copy everywhere. But grab it on Amazon. You will love this book. It will speak to anyone at any probably stage of a Mosaic family. And so I absolutely highly recommend it. I think you should grab a copy of it. It's a great, great read and a beautiful cover as well. So thank you for being on the show today. I appreciate that so much. And we'll have you back. We're not done with this book yet. So we'll have you back again. I've got more questions. Those of you in the audience, please feel free. If you are watching this on replay, drop your comment in that audience and tag myself, Dr. Hutchins. He'll answer your questions. You can send him a DM. If you haven't connected with him, connect with him on LinkedIn, on Facebook, different platforms like that. And of course, you can always reach out to me. But happy to have Dr. Hutchins again on the show. And thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for being here for replay. We greatly appreciate you. Have a beautiful rest of your week. I'm off next week, but we'll be here the following week. So see you in 2, everybody. Bye now.